Hello, hello, truth seekers all over the world. This is Matthew Beavers with Back to the Covenant. Hope you're having an amazing day wherever you're at in the world. Hope the Father is blessing you. So this is continuation of the Torah 101 series. This is going to be part 5. And the name of this teaching is going to be the Scriptural Passover. So shalom, shalom. Hello, hello, everybody in the chat. And then everybody at home that watches this on the replay. Hope you're having an awesome time, whatever time of day you're watching this. I don't know what's up with my cup. It looks crazy. All right, so let's jump into it. And I had a great learning experience last week. You saw my pretty face. Just kidding. My wife's pretty. And I didn't have my notes on the screen, so that was a great learning lesson. Make sure I have my notes on the screen. Can you hear me in the chat before I get going? Get a confirmation on that, and then I will jump into the notes. Good stuff. Can you hear me out there, YouTube land? All right, so let's jump into it. So get my notes rocking. Get rid of my ugly mug. So we're going to be looking at the Scriptural Passover. So to get started, before I get started, I'm going to be challenging the status quo. And so I had this slide last week, and let me come back over here and show my pretty face again. So again, brothers and sisters out there that keep the Torah, I love you. And because I love you, I'm going to speak the truth to you. I'm not doing this for attaboys and all that. I started this channel years ago because the Father put on my heart to. I'm a truth seeker, so I seek truth, and I'm different than some people. I have an obligation in my spirit that if I come across some truth that's important, especially when it comes to the Scripture, I feel obligated to share it with others. So, and sometimes the truth is not convenient, or it's not what you want to hear. It might not be exactly what you believe at the time, but I just ask for you to abide by these two verses right here. Let's take a look at them. So the first one is Proverbs 27:17. It says, "Iron is sharpened by iron, and a man sharpens the face of his friend." So we need people in our lives. I said this last week. We need people in our lives that sharpen us, people that challenge our spiritual status quo. So there's a question on the picture. How willing are you to challenge the status quo? And I mean, in the context of your current understanding of Scripture, are you okay with entertaining the thought of, you know what, I might be wrong about something? And I started entertaining that thought about 18 months ago, and I realized I was wrong on quite a few things. I had to make a lot of changes. And so the other important verse in Proverbs 18:13, "He who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and a shame to him." So let's get into it. So with that last verse in mind I read, just hang with me to the end if you're watching this live or you're watching it later on the replay, because most people will see it not live. So a lot of people, it's awesome to watch videos live, but sometimes you're just not able to schedule, and you have to watch it when you can. So let's jump into it. The Scriptural Passover. So first we're going to look at what the Scriptural Passover is. Then we're going to look at some traditions and false teachings attached to Passover observance. So we're going to start in the original Passover story, Exodus 12, and we're going to start reading 1 through 14. I'm not going to read the whole chapter because that's a lot. Starting in verse 1. "And Yahweh spoke to Moses and to Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month is the beginning of months for you. It is the first month of the year for you. Speak to all the children of Israel, saying, on the 10th day of this month, each one of them is to take for himself a lamb according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the beings. According to each man's need, you make your count for the lamb. So there's a lot of So I purposely did or dedicated this week's teaching just to Passover, because I did the feast last week. We read through most of Leviticus 23, but there's a lot of details when it comes to observance of Passover. So I want to help you do your best to observe Passover next year and so on and so forth until Yeshua comes back. Let the lamb be a perfect one, a year old. Take it from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then all the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it between the evenings. So that phrase, between the evenings, or Ben Ha-Arbayim, that trips a lot of people up, and I think a lot of people have trouble understanding that, and I did at one point. So I'm going to dedicate a teaching in this Torah 101 series just touching on that phrase, because it's important to Passover observance. So we should do our best to understand what that phrase means. So I want to help you out with that as well. I hope this Torah 101 series is very helpful for people that are just coming into Torah now or sometime in the future, or have been keeping Torah for years, for a while. I hope that is helpful to everybody. That's my hope. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts on the lintels of the houses where they eat it. And they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Do not eat it raw, nor boiled and all with water, but roasted in fire, its head with its legs and its inward parts, and do not leave of it until morning. And what remains of it until morning you are to burn with fire. And this is how you eat it: your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Passover of Yahweh. And I shall pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and shall smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the mighty ones of Egypt I shall execute judgment. I am Yahweh, and the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I shall pass over you, and let the plague not come on you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. And this day shall become to you a remembrance. So that's why we observe it now, because it's a remembrance of what happened when they came out of Egypt. We have to keep that in mind. And you shall observe it as a festival to Yahweh throughout your generations. Observe it as a festival and everlasting law. We should be doing it how long? Forever. So let's jump to verse 20 through 27. Get some more details. Do not eat that which is leavened. In all your dwellings you are to eat unleavened bread. And Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said to them, go out and take lambs for yourselves according to your clans, and slaughter the Passover lamb. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the two doorposts with the blood that is in the basin, and none of you shall go out of the door of his house until morning. So again, we see morning, significant when it comes to observing Passover. And Yahweh shall pass on to smite the Egyptians, and shall see the blood on the lintel and on the two doorposts, and Yahweh shall pass over the door, and not allow the destroyer to come into your houses to smite you. And you shall guard this word as a law for you and your sons forever. There it is again. You're supposed to do this forever. The Messiah's death, burial, and resurrection did not change this command in the Torah. And it shall be when you come to the land which Yahweh gives you, as he promised, that you shall guard this service. And it shall be when your children say to you, what does this service mean to you? Then you shall say, it is the Passover slaughtering of Yahweh, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our households, and the people bowed their heads and did obeisance. So, what are we supposed to tell our children about Passover? For those out there that have children, because I don't, but if I did. So let's read what you can see on the screen that's underlined again to see what we're supposed to teach our children about Passover. And it shall be when your children say to you, they're asking, what does this service mean to you? Then you shall say, it is the Passover slaughtering of Yahweh, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our households. That's exactly from the Torah what you're supposed to teach your children about Passover. So let's look and see in Numbers 9, 1 through 14, the Most High's mercy when it comes to observing Passover. Starting in verse 1 of the chapter. Numbers 9, 1 through 14. And Yahweh smote Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month, on the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying, now let the children of Israel perform the Passover at its appointed time. On the 14th day of this month, between the evenings, there's that phrase again. So it's important. We need to understand that. I got your back. Perform it at its appointed time. According to all its laws and right rulings, you perform it. And Moses spoke to the children of Israel to perform the Passover. So they performed the Passover on the 14th day of the first month between the evenings in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all that Yahweh commanded Moses. So the children of Israel did. But there were men who were defiled for a being of a man. So here we have a particular situation. Somebody's unclean. They're around a dead body. So let's see what instructions the Father gave Moses when that comes up. So that they were not able to perform the Passover on that day in the first month. So they came before Moses and Aaron that day, and those men said to him, and they're like, hey guys, what do we do here? We're kind of in a pickle. We are defiled for the being of a man. Why are we withheld from bringing near the offering of Yahweh at its appointed time among the children of Israel? So this is awesome because they had a desire to observe the Passover. They're like, we can't do it. What can we do? So we need to have a desire to observe the Torah. And Moses said to them, wait, let me hear what Yahweh commands concerning you. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, when any male of you or your generations is unclean for a being, or is far away on a journey, he shall still perform the Passover of Yahweh on the 14th day of the second month, not the first, the second. So the same day, but just the second month. Between the evenings, they perform it. With unleavened bread and bitter herbs, they eat it. They do not leave of it until morning. And they do not break a bone of it. According to all the laws of the Passover, they perform it. So according to everything in Exodus 12, that's a reference back to Exodus 12. But the man who is clean and is not on a journey has failed to perform the Passover. That same being shall be cut off from among his people. Being cut, if you're not familiar with that phrase being cut off, it's a big deal. Any kind of cutoff offense is a big deal. And not doing Passover correctly is a cutoff offense. So we need to take it serious, brothers and sisters. Because he did not bring the offering of Yahweh at its appointed time, that man bears his sin. And when a stranger sojourns among you, then he shall perform the Passover of Yahweh. A stranger, not a native Israelite, a stranger. He shall do so according to the law of the Passover, and according to its right ruling, you have one law, both for the stranger and the native of the land. There's one Torah for everybody on the earth, folks. Passover is the only feast in the Torah where you get a second opportunity to observe it. That's a big deal, folks. Need you to wrap your brain around that. I think one of the most important feasts is Day of Atonement, but guess what? You don't get a second opportunity to observe Day of Atonement. You only get one. but you get 2 for Passover because it's that important. But a key thing we need to not forget or overlook that Passover is not a sin sacrifice. A lot of people like to type Yeshua to the Passover, and we're going to get into that in a few minutes. So I would challenge everyone that has a scripture software like eSword to search the words Passover and sin in the search and see how many hits you get. I will hit the easy button for you. That was easy. You only get one verse, and we just read it, and we're going to read it again by itself right here. Numbers 9:13. So this is the only verse in all of Scripture and all of the Torah where you have the word Passover and sin in the same verse. Numbers 9:13. But the man who is clean and is not on a journey and has failed to perform the Passover, there's Passover, that same being shall be cut off from among his people because he did not bring the offering of Yahweh at its appointed time. That man bears his sin, their sin. So it's interesting about this verse is the fact that it makes it clear that if you don't observe the scriptural Passover, it is sin. So let's look at Messiah and his Passover observance. We're going to go to Matthew 26:17 through 21. And on the first day of unleavened bread, the taught ones came to Yeshua, saying to him, where do you wish us to prepare for you to eat the Passover? And he said, so his homies, his 12 homies, his disciples are saying, hey, Master Adonai, however you want to say it, where would you like us to prepare so we can observe Passover? And his response is, and he said, go into the city to a certain man and say to him, the teacher says, my time is near. I am to observe the Passover at your house with my taught ones. And the taught ones did as Yeshua had ordered them and prepared the Passover. And when evening came, he sat down with the 12. And while they were eating, they weren't eating Taco Bell or McDonald's. They were eating Passover. He said, truly I say to you, one of you shall deliver me up. And of course, he's talking about Judas. But we have to remember, lamb or goat was on the menu. It was on the table in front of Yeshua and his disciples at the Last Supper. There are some out there that teach that's not the case. I would recommend re-examining that belief, that understanding. We need to follow Yeshua Messiah's example and observe the scriptural Passover once a year. So I'll share a quick story real quick. So anybody that is old school and familiar with Pal Talk, it was like chat rooms like probably early 90s. It's been a long time. And there was a guy named, what was his name? Capico or something like that. So he was a vegan all year, except for one time he ate meat, and that's on Passover. So that's really cool. So he was dedicated to his veganism, but he's also dedicated to the Most High and keeping the Torah, and that's really cool that he ate Passover once a year. So now that we've seen what to do on Passover, let's look at what not to do, because it's always good to look at what to do, but it's even more valuable sometimes to look at what not to do. So we know the world is filled with all kinds of traditions. Shalom, shalom, polyfermentalist. That's a mouthful. So I found that, so I tried to represent the 3 big pagan feasts of the year. Of course, Christmas, then Easter and Halloween. But actually, on the bottom right, this is this really grotesque gentleman is actually Krampus. And you can also find this Christmas demon, as they refer to him, if you search Nuke Ruprecht. I'm not going to spell that. Just do research on Krampus if you're not familiar with the Christmas demon, as they call him. But he can also double for a character on Halloween because he looks pretty, looks nasty looking dude. And then, of course, little girl with the Easter eggs representing Easter. And then we got I found this picture. It was amazing. It's perfect. It's Satan Claus. I mean, excuse me, a little slip there. Santa Claus kneeling down, placing a gift under the idol. That's all I got to say about that. So, not all traditions are bad, but let's look at Matthew 15, verses 1 through 6. See how Yeshua handled the Pharisees in one instance. Then there came to Yeshua scribes and Pharisees from Jerusalem, saying, "Why do your taught ones transgress the tradition of the elders?" Now, are the scribes and Pharisees saying, "Why do your taught ones transgress the Torah?" No, they're more concerned about the traditions and the traditions of the elders than keeping Torah, as you see in the context of the story. For they do not wash their hands when they eat bread. That's a tradition in Judaism. That's not from the Torah. But he answering said to them, "Why do you also transgress the command of Elohim because of your tradition?" There's the key. For Elohim has commanded, saying, "Respect your father and your mother, and he who curses father or mother, let him be put to death." But you say, "Whoever says to his father or mother, 'Whatever profit you might have received from me has been dedicated,' is certainly released from respecting his father or mother. So you have nullified the command of Elohim by your traditions." That's the key, that last verse or that last sentence right there. Let's read it again. So you have nullified the command of Elohim by your tradition. If tradition puts a hedge between you and keeping Yah's Torah, you have a problem. All right, so I want to share a yearly tradition that me and my family have. And let me show my pretty face again. So once a year, my family around the fall time, so it's actually gets pretty close to Sukkot sometimes. Interesting. So we have a yearly tradition. It's interesting. Interesting, Alex. Interesting comment. So we have a yearly tradition once a year that me and my lovely bride, if both of us can make it, sometimes we both can't make it. This year she was out of state, so she couldn't make it this time. So it's us, my sister and her kids, and my mom, and my oldest niece's husband as well. He started coming last few years. So we live close to LJ, Georgia, about an hour away. Beautiful place. They have a bunch of beautiful. It's North Georgia mountains. Beautiful vineyards, beautiful apple orchards. So what we do is, the family tradition is usually on a Sunday when we can get everybody's schedule together, because it's interesting getting a bunch of grown folks that have busy schedules together. So we meet at Amicalola Falls, which is a amazing state park. We eat lunch by the creek, hang out, take pictures, hike to the waterfall. If anybody that lives locally knows what I'm talking about, it's an amazing, amazing place. And then we go to one of the apple orchards, and we don't normally pick the apples, but it is a pick me place, whatever they call it. And then they have a bunch of activities for the kids. And this is something that we do every year. So this is a tradition in my family, but this is not a bad tradition. Not all traditions are bad. This does not nullify the Torah. We just go have a good time with family, get some exercise, fresh air, get some grub, and go have a good time. This is not what was going on in Matthew 15. That's interesting. I might put that on there real quick. Boop. Thanks for that, Alex. That's a very accurate comment. All right, so let me jump back to my notes after sharing that story. So let's look at some Passover traditions. So I found this article on www.happypassover.net/meal. So it's basically talking about a Passover meal from a Jewish perspective. So let's look at some of their traditions that they do during a Seder meal. A hard-boiled egg. The egg constantly reminded the people of the brutality of the Egyptians and how with every tyrannical phase, the Jews only got stronger. Anything kept in boiling water will melt. On the contrary, eggs harden. It also symbolized the concept of a new lease of life, a variety of greens. Green is the color of hope and everything related to spring. This usually consisted of parsley, sprigs, and celery, a roasted shank bone of lamb. The lamb is a grim reminder of the number of lives lost and the bloodshed for saving the lives of the others. Bitter greens and herbs. This is essential on the Seder plate as it constantly reminds the Jews of their ill treatment and misfortunes in the land of bondage. Horseradish, woo, that stuff will open you up. Horseradish is commonly kept on the plate for this segment. The greens would then be dipped in salt water and consumed. Matzah. The unleavened bread tells the grappling's tale of the exodus of the Jews from Egypt. And let me stop right here. It wasn't just the Jews that came out of Egypt. It was the 12 tribes of Israel. And the Jews don't represent all 12. This is a common mistake and understanding by a lot of people. They'll say, oh, you do those Jewish feasts? No, they're not Jewish feasts. They're feasts for anybody that has a heart to serve the Most High. Whether you are a native-born Israelite, you're part of the tribe of Judah, which is one of the tribes the Jews represent. So I want to tackle that because a lot of people say, oh, you're Jewish because you do this or that in the Torah. No, Jews aren't the only ones that keep the Torah. It shows that they left in such haste that they didn't even wait for the bread to rise. Salt water. As uncommon as this may sound, salt water was an essential component on the Seder plate, which reminded the Jews of the number of tears wasted and shed over agony and loss of lives. Hasaret, This consists of nuts, apple, and wine mixture that bears resemblance to straw. This reminds the Jews of the materials and the mortar used to build the treasure cities for the Pharaoh. The only thing that kept them from going through all the cruelty was a bleak line of hope that they would be delivered to the promised land. So that's end quote from the article. So here's a question. Can we see all of this in the Torah within the instructions regarding Passover observance? No, only two represented here are actually in the command of the Torah. That's the matzah and the bitter herbs. Everything else is tradition. So let's look at the traditional Seder plate versus the scriptural Passover. So we're going to read Exodus 12, 5 through 8 again to get context of what you actually eat during a scriptural Passover observance. Starting in verse 5. Let the lamb be a perfect one, a year-old male. Take it from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then all the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it between the evenings. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat it. And they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire, with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. They shall eat it. So according to Scripture, during Passover, we eat, as Torah-keeping believers, we eat the lamb or the goat, an animal that is actually killed. Bitter herbs and unleavened bread. That's the three things you're supposed to eat during a scriptural Passover observance. But in the Seder meal, the lamb shank comes from the grocery store. Is that what the Torah instructs us to do? No, it's not. So we need to follow Messiah's example and observe the scriptural Passover, not traditions of men. So what about the phrase Messiah, our Passover lamb? So let me read a couple verses in Exodus 12 again as a reminder. And it shall be when your children say to you, what does this service mean to you? Then you shall say, it is the Passover slaughtering of Yahweh, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our households, and the people bowed their heads and did obeisance. And flip over to the New Testament, Paul's writings in 1 Corinthians 5:7, it says, therefore cleanse out the old leaven, so that they are a new lump, as you are unleavened. For also Messiah, our Passover, was offered for us. So what do these two verses have to do with each other? A lot. And let's get into it. So let's get into, going to get into the context of Paul's, what he said in 1 Corinthians 5. But first, we need to look at the warning Peter gave us about Paul's writings. We're going to look at 2 Peter 3:14 through 17. And most people that will quote Paul to say the law's done away with, this or that, they forget about these verses because Peter gave us a strong warning about Paul. So then, beloved ones, looking forward to this, do your utmost to be found by him in peace, spotless and blameless, and reckon the patience of our master as deliverance, as also our beloved brother Paul wrote to you, according to the wisdom given to him, as also in all his letters, speaking in them concerning these matters, in which some are hard to understand, which those who are untaught and unstable twist to their own destruction, as they do also the other scriptures. That's the key. People take Paul's writings and they twist it to their own destruction. When they say the Torah is done away with, or it supersedes the Messiah's example or his words. You then, beloved ones, being forewarned, watch, lest you also fall from your own steadfastness, being led away with the delusion of the lawless. Shalom, shalom, firmament liquor. That's a funny name. So let's look at the context, because, you know, context is king, or context is the key to unlock the understanding of what's really going on. So let's look at the context of 1 Corinthians 5, because a lot of people will pull verse 7 out and say, oh, look, we don't have to do the Passover anymore. So let's see what that chapter is talking about. Starting in verse 1, it is commonly reported that there is whoring among you, and such whoring as is not even named among the Gentiles, so as one to have his father's wife. Okay, so we're talking about sexual immorality right here. Nothing about Passover yet. And you have been puffed up and did not rather mourn, so that he who has done this deed be removed from among you. Okay, so we're talking about pride. So we got sexual immorality, pride, nothing about Passover yet. For I indeed, as absent in body, but present in spirit, have already judged the one who did this, as though I were present in the name of our Master Yahshua Messiah, when you are gathered together, and my spirit, with the power of our Master Yahshua Messiah, deliver such a one to Satan for destruction of the flesh, in order that his spirit be saved. In the day of the Master Yahshua, your boasting is not good. So we're talking about pride again. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the entire lump? All right, so I'm going to stop right here. So far we got pride, we got sexual immorality, nothing about Passover yet. All right, here we go. Therefore, cleanse out the old leaven, so that you are a new lump, as you are unleavened. So are people really unleavened bread? No. So we got some figurative language here. All right, here we go. Verse 7. For also Messiah, our Passover, was offered for us. So here's the infamous quote that's pulled way out of context by people that say, we don't have to do the Passover because the Messiah is our Passover. So let's read verse 8 now. So then, let us observe the festival. So right after that, Paul says to observe the festival. In the next verse, that's why you got to read context, folks. Not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of evil and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. So I'm just curious, if you go to your local grocery store, can you buy a loaf of unleavened bread of sincerity and truth? No, you can't, because Paul is speaking figurative again. There's a decent amount of figurative language in this chapter. So we can't always take everything in Scripture literally. A lot of it, yes, but not everything. I wrote to you in my letter not to keep with those who whore. So again, we're back to sexual immorality. And I certainly did not mean with those of this world who whore, or with the greedy of gain, or swindlers, or idolaters, since then you would need to go out of the world, but now I have written to you not to keep company with anyone called a brother if he is one who whores, or greedy of gain, or an idolater, or a reveler, or a drunkard, or a swindler, not even to eat with such a one. But for what have I to do with judging outsiders? Do you not judge those who are inside? But Elohim judges those who are outside. And put away the wicked one from among you. So we got to read context, folks. Sadly, people pull verse 7 out of context and say we don't have to do Passover anymore. But in verse 8, the next verse, Paul says to observe the festival. And we have to keep in mind as well that there's a good amount of figurative language in verse 7 and the surrounding verses. And I would throw it out there that Messiah, our Passover, was offered for us. I would say that that's figurative language. I'm sure I might get a comment or two on that one, but just looking at the full context, and verse 7 is surrounded by figurative language. Why would that not be figurative as well? Just something to consider. So with some, all roads lead to Messiah. A lot of people that keep Torah were raised in the church in Christianity, and myself included. We're all learned a lot of bad teachings in the church. Not everything the church teaches is bad. There's a lot of very loving people that do a lot for people in the church, but I'm talking about bad theology here. I'm not talking about people's character. There's a lot of great people in Christianity. I'm talking about theology and bad teachings. A lot of the bad teachings have to do with the Messiah and connecting or typing him to other things in the scriptures that might not be the case. But after coming out of the church, we need to get the leaven of false teachings out of our lives because it holds us back when we keep Torah. The way that people take 1 Corinthians 5:7 and say that we don't have to keep the Passover anymore, you would think that Exodus 12:26 through 27 reads like this. When the Messiah is offered up on the stake, we are no longer to keep the everlasting command of the Passover slaughtering of Yahweh. He is our atoning offering, so no longer do we slaughter the Passover lamb during Passover. No longer do you need to put the blood on your doorpost. You are covered by Messiah's blood. This is an everlasting covenant throughout all your generations. That's not what the Torah says. That's not what Exodus 12 says. And please do not take what I just said out of context. I made it up. Scripture does not say that. Do not take that literal. Trying to make a point. Messiah Yeshua kept Passover, and we should too. His death, burial, and resurrection doesn't change the fact that we need to keep the Torah and keep Passover. Oh, but some will say, oh, we're not in Jerusalem, Matt. Deuteronomy 16:5-6 says, you are not allowed to slaughter the Passover within any of your gates, which Yahweh your Elohim gives you, but at the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell. There you slaughter the Passover in the evening at the going down of the sun at the appointed time you came out of Egypt. There are many believers that will use this verse and others like it to say we cannot keep Passover if we are not in Jerusalem. I would say, to me, that's putting Yahweh in a box, and we don't need to put him in a box ever. So I covered this last week in the feast chapter, but I need to cover it again in case somebody sees this and doesn't see that video as well. So we're going to look at the origins of this teaching, and it is found in 1 Kings 9:1-7. And it came to be when Solomon had finished building the house of Yahweh and the house of the sovereign and all the desire of Solomon, which he was pleased to do, that Yahweh appeared to Solomon the second time as he had appeared to him at Gibeon. And Yahweh said to him, I have heard your prayer and your supplication that you have made before me. I have set this house apart, which you have built to put my name there forever. There you go. That's where they get it from. Put my name there forever. That's what it says. And my eyes and my heart shall always be there. And you, if, here we go, here's a big word, if, big 2-letter word, if you walk before me as your father David walked in integrity of heart and in uprightness to do according to all that I have commanded you, if you guard my laws and my right rulings, then I shall establish the throne of your reign over Israel forever. As I promised David your father, saying, there is not to cease a man of yours on the throne of Israel, if you had all turned back, you or your sons, from following me, and do not guard my commands, my laws, which I have set before you, but shall go and serve other mighty ones and bow yourselves to them, then I shall cut off Israel from the face of the soil which I have given them, and send away from my presence this house which I have set apart for my name. And Israel shall be a proverb and a mockery among all the peoples. So, here's a question we have to ponder. Has Israel been obedient since Solomon's day? No. And a few chapters later, verse 1 Kings 11:36, and to his son I give one tribe, so that my servant David shall always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen for myself to put my name there. So in 1 Kings 9:3 and 11:36 are the basis for the belief that Israel can only observe certain certain feasts in Jerusalem, including Passover. But we have to remember that Yah has the final word on all matters. So in the next book of Kings, 2 Kings 23:25-27, we see, and before him there was no sovereign like him who turned back to Yahweh with all his heart. So this is a dude that loves the Father, has a desire to serve him, and with all his being and with all his might, according to all the Torah of Moses. And after him none rose up like him. However, Yahweh did not turn from the fierceness of his great wrath, with which his wrath burned against Judah, because of all the provocations with which Manasseh had provoked him. And Yahweh said, even Judah I shall remove from my presence, as I have removed Israel, and I shall reject this city Jerusalem, which I have chosen, and the house of which I said, my name is there. Yes, the Most High said he would place his name in Jerusalem forever, but he also said he would reject Jerusalem because of disobedience, and that is what happened. For anyone that believes we can't observe Passover because we aren't in Jerusalem, I would recommend re-examining that belief and look at the verses that I have provided and look at the full context of all three of the chapters. Let's never put the Most High in a box. We can serve him wherever we are dwelling, whether we live in Jerusalem, Israel, or Jerusalem, Georgia. And I think there's a Jerusalem, New Jersey too, I believe. There's a few of them. So let's all do our best to keep the scriptural Passover and steer clear of man-made traditions. So thank you for everybody that is here on the chat, and shalom. And shalom to anybody that's watching this on the replay after the live stream's over. So if this video was a blessing, do me a favor and share it, like it. And if you haven't subscribed already, I started a few weeks ago, a live stream every week, and I put scriptural cosmology videos out as well. And then I have the Journey to the Truth interviews almost on a weekly basis as well. So if you agree, I would love to hear in the comments. If you disagree, then think any points I made, I would love to hear that in the comments as well, because I know there's a lot of people that disagree with some of the information I brought up, some of the points I made. But I would challenge you to re-examine some of those beliefs that you learned in the church, or that if you came out of Judaism, you're raised in that as well. Challenge you to re-examine those in the context of all the scriptures, starting with the foundation of Torah. So don't have any questions in the chat, so I'm going to jump off here. Shalom and Yah bless.